Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to explore some fascinating sources on Gestalt therapy?
Always up for a deep dive. And this one looks particularly intriguing.
It does. The excerpts we've got from Ofti Jocelyn suggest Gestalt therapy might be more than just therapy.
Oh, more than therapy, how?
Well, it hints at it being a Western path to enlightenment.
Now that's a fascinating angle, and actually the book really delves into that. But to understand that, maybe we should start with the founder of Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls.
Definitely. Those personal stories, they often give you a glimpse into the heart of a theory.
Absolutely. And the book shares some pretty captivating anecdotes about Perls. For example, there's a story about him falling asleep during a student's dream exploration.
Oh, was it a boring dream?
Apparently, not the most exciting dream. The student, well, he complained.
I can imagine. So what did Pearls do?
Perls woke up, wrote him a check, and promptly fell back asleep.
Wow. That's classic Pearls, I have to say. It sounds like he was really emphasizing present moment awareness, right? Even if it meant, challenging social norms.
Exactly. He was definitely not bound by convention. There's another anecdote where he was smoking under a no-smoking sign.
Oh, I can see this coming. What happened?
Someone confronted him, of course, and Perls, he simply stated, "I neither have the right to smoke nor not to smoke. I simply smoke."
He certainly had a way of making people think. But how do we bridge these anecdotes about Pearls with this idea of Gestalt therapy as a path to enlightenment?
Well, that's where the book's author, John Enright, comes in. He had this aha moment, realizing that Pearl's teachings went beyond the techniques, like he was pointing towards a deeper understanding of self and reality, much like, well, the concept of enlightenment.
So we're talking about reaching a heightened state of spiritual awareness, not just addressing, psychological issues.
Yes, exactly. The book argues that Gestalt therapy aims to awaken individuals from self-created illusions. The stories we tell ourselves that keep us from truly experiencing reality as it is, it guides them towards a sense of, okayness in the present moment.
So rather than trying to fix problems or achieve some ideal state, it encourages us to see through those illusions and accept what is right here, right now.
Precisely. And that's where this idea of a Western path to enlightenment comes in. The book suggests that Gestalt therapy's principles and techniques can be seen as a practical roadmap to achieve this, heightened awareness and acceptance.
That's a very compelling idea.
Yeah.
It sounds like Gestalt therapy is more about a fundamental shift in perspective than about applying a set of techniques, right?
Absolutely. And a core principle it highlights is that a person already possesses everything they need for a fulfilling life. It's about uncovering that potential, not adding something that's missing.
I see. That resonates with the concept of self-actualization in humanistic psychology. It's fascinating how Gestalt therapy weaves together these different threads.
It is. Now, to dig a bit deeper, let's talk about the concept of awareness in Gestalt therapy. It's not just about being aware of thoughts and feelings, but also about the energy behind them.
The energy. Can you unpack that a bit? What do you mean by the energy behind our thoughts and feelings?
Sure. The book uses a very vivid example to illustrate this. Imagine a man claiming to love his wife while simultaneously clenching his fist. His words might say, "love," but the energy.
I see where you're going with it.
Exactly. The energy behind them tells a different story.
That's a powerful image. It highlights that disconnect that can exist between what we say and what we truly feel.
Precisely. A Gestalt therapist would help someone become aware of that disconnect, guide them to explore that clenched fist, the tension, to understand the full picture.
So it's about connecting their words with their actual experience, bridging the gap between internal and external worlds.
Exactly. The book emphasizes that true mental health is achieved when awareness and energy are integrated, when our words and actions are aligned with our genuine feelings.
That makes sense. So would you say Gestalt therapy focuses on bringing those hidden energy processes to light? Like helping people become aware of those subtle cues that often contradict their conscious thoughts?
Absolutely. Recognizing that our bodies are constantly communicating with us, offering valuable information about our true experience.
That is a fascinating perspective. It seems like Gestalt therapy really emphasizes embodied awareness, paying attention to our bodies as much as our thoughts.
Exactly. It's about honoring the interconnectedness of our physical, emotional, and mental states.
Okay, so we've touched on the unconventional nature of Fritz Perls, the core principle of okayness, and this importance of integrating awareness and energy. Gestalt therapy seems like a very holistic and experiential approach.
It is. And to answer your earlier question about how these principles connect to enlightenment, The book suggests that Gestalt therapy helps us see through the illusion of separateness, allows us to experience ourselves as part of a larger whole, connected to everything around us.
That's a profound idea. And it seems to tie back to that concept of okayness as well. If we can let go of those self-created illusions and embrace the interconnectedness of all things, perhaps that's where true peace and acceptance lie.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our inherent wholeness, realizing that we are, in essence, okay just as we are.
That's a really powerful message. But if we're already okay as we are, then what's the role of therapy? What do Gestalt therapists actually do?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another key point from the book. Gestalt therapy isn't primarily about techniques, it's more of a way of being, a lens through which to view life. And the techniques themselves are simply tools to support that way of being.
So less about following a set of steps, more about cultivating a certain attitude or perspective.
Exactly. The specific techniques should be adapted to each unique situation and individual, meeting people where they are, guiding them on their journey of self-discovery.
So Gestalt therapists are more like facilitators or guides,
Yeah.
right? Helping people access their own inner wisdom
Yeah.
rather than imposing solutions.
Precisely. They create a space for exploration, experimentation. Ultimately, for individuals to come to their own realizations, make their own choices.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like Gestalt therapy empowers individuals to take ownership of their lives and to find their own path to, well, okayness.
Absolutely. And this brings us to a rather provocative question that the book raises. Are humans fundamentally okay or not okay?
Wow. That's a question that has kept philosophers debating for centuries.
Mhm.
Where does the book land on that?
Well, John Enright, the author, shares his own journey. Initially, he believed in the not okayness of humans, but through his work with Gestalt therapy, he came to embrace this concept of inherent perfection.
That's quite a shift. So he's saying that even with all our flaws and mistakes, we are, at our core, perfect.
That's the essence of it. He suggests that the not okay feeling often stems from our own self-judgment, the stories we tell ourselves, not from some inherent flaw in our nature.
That's a very hopeful perspective. But how does Gestalt therapy help people bridge that gap between their perceived not okayness and this inherent perfection?
One technique described in the book is called the velvet sledgehammer.
Velvet sledgehammer. That's quite an image. I'm picturing something both gentle and forceful.
It is a rather intriguing name. Essentially, it involves the therapist relentlessly pointing out the positive aspects of a situation or behavior, even those that seem, well, bad at first glance. By highlighting the inherent value in everything, the therapist helps the individual challenge their self-criticism and uncover their own okayness.
So instead of focusing on what's wrong, the therapist emphasizes what's right, even in those things the individual might perceive as negative.
Exactly. It's about reframing our perspective and recognizing that even our so-called flaws can have hidden value.
This resonates with that Gestalt principle of accepting what is, rather than trying to change or judge it.
Absolutely. And it's through this radical acceptance, embracing the totality of our experience, that we can begin to touch that state of okayness, which, is the foundation for a fulfilling life.
That's a powerful idea.
Hmm.
The velvet sledgehammer technique seems to be about finding the hidden gifts within our struggles, not denying them.
Precisely. Shifting our focus from what's missing to what's already present.
This reminds me of reframing in cognitive therapy, challenging negative thoughts by looking for alternative, more positive interpretations.
Similar concept. And the book suggests that when applied consistently, this reframing process can lead to profound shifts in perspective and self-acceptance, which is how it connects Gestalt therapy to this concept of enlightenment.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together. By challenging our self-judgment, embracing the totality of our experience, we can move towards a deeper sense of okayness and connection with ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly. Recognizing that we already have everything we need within us, even if it doesn't always feel that way.
That's a beautiful reminder. But how does this play out in practice? Can you share examples of these principles applied in real-life therapy sessions?
Absolutely. The book shares several compelling case studies. One that stood out to me was about a young widow who'd been grieving for 3 years. Her friends urged her to move on, but she felt stuck.
That sounds incredibly difficult. Grief can be so challenging to navigate, especially with external pressure to, move on.
Absolutely. And in this case, instead of forcing her to change, to let go of her grief, the therapist did something unexpected. He enthusiastically supported her grief.
Really? That's surprising. I would have expected him to encourage her to focus on the future, start building a new life.
It is counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but that's the beauty of Gestalt therapy, meeting people where they are, even if it means diving headfirst into that pain.
So the therapist was honoring her experience, acknowledging her grief as valid, a really important part of her journey.
Exactly. He praised her deep love and commitment to her husband, recognizing the depth of her loss.
That must have been so validating for her. By fully embracing her grief, it sounds like the therapist helped her move through it.
You're right. She realized she had fully honored her love and that she was ready to embrace a new chapter.
It's a powerful example of how supporting someone's experience, even the painful parts, can be more healing than trying to change it.
Absolutely. It speaks to that core principle of okayness, accepting what is rather than resisting it. The book offers another fascinating case study, this time about a teenage girl who kept running away from foster homes.
Oh, that sounds like a very challenging situation.
Hmm.
Teenagers in the foster care system often face so much adversity.
They do. This girl was adamant about wanting to live with her mother, even though her mother had made it clear that wasn't an option.
Sounds like she was holding on to a fantasy, maybe a way of coping with the pain of her situation.
That's insightful. And again, instead of trying to convince her to accept reality or let go of her dream, the therapist took a different approach. He fully supported her, well, seemingly impossible desire.
Really? How could that be helpful? Wouldn't that just reinforce her fantasy, make it harder to face reality?
That's what makes Gestalt therapy so unique. By supporting her desire, without judgment, the therapist created a space for her to fully experience it and to see its limitations.
So by embracing her fantasy, she was able to confront its impossibility and ultimately let it go.
Exactly. It's a great example of how sometimes we need to fully embrace our desires, even the unrealistic ones, to see them for what they are and move on.
It's like that saying, what we resist persists. By resisting our fantasies or desires, we often just give them more power.
Precisely. And in this case, by supporting the girl's desire, the therapist actually helped her confront reality. Eventually, she accepted that living with her mother wasn't an option.
That's a fascinating example of Gestalt therapy working in unconventional ways, meeting people where they are, guiding them through their own process of discovery.
Absolutely. It highlights the importance of trust and acceptance in the therapeutic relationship and how those qualities can facilitate, profound change.
These case studies really bring those principles to life. I'm starting to see how this Western path to enlightenment idea works in practice.
It's about recognizing that we already have the wisdom and resources we need within us. The therapist's role is to help us access those inner resources.
So it's not about the therapist being the expert fixing the patient, but the patient being the expert on their own experience. The therapist is more of a guide, a facilitator.
Exactly. This emphasis on patient empowerment is key to Gestalt therapy.
It's a very empowering approach. Now, I'm curious about this concept of okayness. The book mentions that Gestalt therapy seeks to cultivate a profound sense of okayness in individuals.
You're right, okayness is central to Gestalt therapy, but it's often misunderstood. It's not about achieving some perfect state or denying life's challenges. It's about embracing the totality of our experience, including the difficult parts, and recognizing that we are inherently whole and complete, just as we are.
So, not striving for some idealized version of ourselves, but accepting ourselves unconditionally, with all our flaws and imperfections.
Exactly. Recognizing that those imperfections are what make us unique and beautiful. Embracing our humanness.
That's a really powerful message, especially in a culture that often tells us we need to be fixed or improved.
Yeah.
How does Gestalt therapy help people access this sense of okayness?
The book delves into various techniques and principles that contribute to this process. One key element is the emphasis on present moment awareness.
Ah, yes, the here and now. I've encountered that concept in mindfulness practices as well.
It's a common thread. Gestalt therapy emphasizes that the only moment we have true power to create change is the present moment. The past is gone, the future is uncertain, and all we truly have is this present moment.
So letting go of regrets about the past, anxieties about the future, and embracing the power of now.
Precisely. And recognizing that everything we need to heal, to grow, to create a fulfilling life is available to us in this present moment.
It's like saying, this moment is all there is and it's enough.
Beautifully said. And Gestalt therapy offers a variety of techniques for bringing our awareness into the here and now. focusing on our breath, noticing our bodily sensations, paying attention to the details of our surroundings.
Cultivating a sense of presence, grounding ourselves in the reality of our immediate experience.
Exactly. And this practice can have a profound impact on our lives. It can help reduce stress, increase our enjoyment, and help us connect more deeply with ourselves and others.
Sounds like cultivating present moment awareness is an essential foundation for experiencing that sense of okayness that Gestalt therapy emphasizes.
Absolutely. By being fully present, we can let go of the need to control, fix ourselves, and just allow ourselves to be.
That's a beautiful idea. It seems like Gestalt therapy offers a very liberating and empowering perspective on life.
It does. Now, another key concept that contributes to okayness is the idea of responsibility.
Okay, responsibility. That's a pretty big concept. How is it viewed in Gestalt therapy?
It's not about blame or guilt. Responsibility in Gestalt therapy is about recognizing that we are the authors of our own experience, that we have the power to choose how we respond to the world around us.
So not saying it's all my fault, but empowering ourselves to make different choices.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have agency, even when facing challenging circumstances, taking ownership of our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
So instead of saying, you made me feel this way, a Gestalt therapist might encourage a patient to say, I feel this way in response to what you said.
Precisely. Shifting from a place of blame, of victimhood, to a place of empowerment and choice. Reclaiming our power.
It seems like taking responsibility for our own experience is crucial for cultivating that okayness.
You're right. When we feel empowered to make choices, even if they're limited by external circumstances, we are more likely to feel good about ourselves and our place in the world.
It's about recognizing that we're not simply passive recipients of our experiences, but active participants in shaping our reality.
Exactly. And this sense of agency is essential for living a fulfilling and meaningful life.
That's a powerful reminder. Now, the book mentions a specific technique for cultivating responsibility, the I take responsibility exercise. Can you tell us more about that?
It's a simple yet powerful practice. The individual identifies a situation where they feel stuck or powerless. Then they practice reframing their language to take ownership of their experience.
So instead of saying, I can't do this, they might say, I'm choosing not to do this right now.
Exactly. By consciously shifting their language like this, they start to shift their internal experience as well. They move from a place of helplessness to a place of empowerment.
We're rewiring our brains to focus on the choices we do have, even in the face of limitations.
That's a great way to put it. And this practice of taking responsibility can have a profound impact on our lives. It can help us break free from limiting beliefs, set healthy boundaries, and create a life that's aligned with our values.
Like taking back the reins of our lives, steering ourselves in the direction we want to go.
Exactly. Reclaiming our power, stepping into our full potential.
This concept of responsibility is really resonating with me. It's like a key that unlocks a whole new level of freedom and possibility.
It is. And this sense of freedom and possibility is at the heart of what the book describes as the Western path to enlightenment. It's about recognizing that we are not limited by our circumstances, but by our own beliefs and perceptions.
That's a powerful idea. So not about denying the reality of our limitations, but recognizing that we have the power to choose how we respond to them.
Precisely. And it's through this process of taking responsibility, of owning our experience and making conscious choices, that we can begin to liberate ourselves from the constraints of our own minds, to tap into the infinite potential that lies within us.
That's a beautiful vision. Now, the book also delves into this fascinating realm of dreams, how they're viewed through the lens of Gestalt therapy. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. Dreams are seen as a rich source of information about our unconscious processes, and Gestalt therapy offers unique and engaging ways of working with them that, well, differ from traditional dream analysis.
So it's not about interpreting symbols or searching for those hidden meanings.
Not in the traditional sense. Gestalt therapy encourages the dreamer to fully embody the dream experience, to step into the dream world and become a participant, not just an observer.
It's like bringing the dream to life, making it a living, breathing experience, rather than just a story we tell ourselves upon waking.
Exactly. The dreamer might be asked to become different elements of the dream, to engage in dialogue with dream characters or act out scenes. The focus is on experiencing the dream fully, allowing its meaning to emerge organically through that experience.
Sounds like a very experiential and embodied approach to dream work. I imagine it could be quite powerful.
It can be. And one of the key principles in Gestalt dream work is that every element of the dream represents a part of the dreamer.
So the characters, the settings, the objects, they're all reflections of aspects of the dreamer's psyche.
Precisely. And by interacting with these different dream elements, the dreamer can gain valuable insights into their own inner world, the dynamics at play within them.
It's like the dream is a mirror, reflecting back to us those hidden aspects of ourselves.
Exactly. And Gestalt therapy provides a framework for exploring that mirror, integrating those hidden aspects into our conscious awareness.
Fascinating. I'm definitely intrigued by this Gestalt approach to dream work. It seems like a really creative and empowering way to tap into the wisdom of our unconscious.
It is, and the book highlights a particular Gestalt dreamwork technique called playing it out.
Playing it out. That sounds interesting. Tell me more.
It's a technique where the dreamer chooses an object that represents a significant element of the dream, like a character or a symbol, and then interacts with that object as if it were alive.
So they might talk to the object, ask it questions, or even act out scenes with it.
Exactly. By embodying the object and allowing it to speak, the dreamer can access deeper layers of meaning and understanding that might not be available through traditional interpretation methods. It's like giving a voice to the unconscious.
That's a powerful image. It sounds like playing it out allows the dreamer to bypass their intellectual mind and tap into a more intuitive, embodied understanding of the dream.
Precisely. And that intuitive understanding can often be more profound and transformative than any intellectual interpretation.
I'm definitely going to try this playing it out technique. It sounds like a really fun and engaging way to explore my dreams. Now, the book also mentions the concept of unfinished business in the context of Gestalt therapy. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. Unfinished business refers to unresolved emotional issues, often stemming from past experiences that continue to impact our present lives.
So it's like carrying around emotional baggage from the past that weighs us down in the present.
That's a great way to put it. And Gestalt therapy offers a way to unpack that baggage, resolve those unfinished issues so we can move forward with more freedom.
How does Gestalt therapy address this unfinished business?
One key technique is the empty chair technique.
Oh, I've heard about that one. The patient imagines someone they have unfinished business with sitting in an empty chair and then engages in dialogue with them.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to bring those unresolved emotions to the surface and work through them in a safe environment.
So they might express their anger, sadness, or hurt to the person in the empty chair, even if that person isn't physically present.
Right. And by expressing those emotions, having that dialogue with the imagined person, the patient can begin to heal those old wounds, release the emotional charge they've been carrying. It's like finally having that conversation you never got to have, finding a sense of closure.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Giving ourselves permission to feel those unresolved emotions and express them in a healthy way.
exactly. And resolving this unfinished business is seen as a key step toward achieving that okayness Gestalt therapy seeks to cultivate.
Like we're clearing out the clutter of the past so we can create space for something new, more fulfilling in the present.
Absolutely. And this focus on the present moment is another core principle of Gestalt therapy.
Right, we talked about the importance of the here and now earlier.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the past is gone, the future hasn't arrived, and the only moment where we have the power to create change is right now. Embracing the power of now.
And recognizing that all the wisdom and resources we need are available to us in this present moment if we're willing to tap into them.
Precisely. So it's not about ignoring the past or denying the future, but recognizing that the present moment is where our power lies. It's in this present moment that we can access the fullness of our being and connect with that inherent okayness that lies within each of us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Okay, as we continue our deep dive, I'm curious to hear more about this concept of resistance. The book mentions that resistance is viewed differently in Gestalt therapy than in other approaches.
That's right. In traditional therapies, resistance is often seen as a negative force, something to overcome. But in Gestalt therapy, resistance is seen as valuable information.
So instead of fighting against resistance, the Gestalt therapist tries to understand it, work with it.
Exactly. They might ask, what's the purpose of this resistance? Or what's it trying to protect? Recognizing that resistance serves a function, that it often arises from a place of self-preservation.
So not labeling resistance as bad or trying to force the patient to let go of it, but honoring its presence and exploring its underlying message.
Precisely. Sometimes just acknowledging the resistance can be enough to allow it to soften, to release its grip. Other times, the therapist might need to adjust their approach, offer a different technique to help the patient feel safe enough to move through the resistance.
It's like meeting that resistance with compassion and curiosity, rather than judgment or force.
Exactly. And this approach to resistance is just one example of how Gestalt therapy prioritizes the patient's experience, empowering them to find their own path towards healing and growth.
Recognizing that the patient is the expert on their own experience, the therapist's role is to be a supportive guide, not a director.
You got it. And this emphasis on patient empowerment is woven throughout the book. It's about honoring the individual's journey and trusting their innate capacity for healing.
It's a beautiful reminder that we all have the potential within us to heal, to create a life that is fulfilling and aligned with our deepest values.
I couldn't agree more. Now, as we delve further, I'd like to highlight a particularly insightful concept, the awareness continuum.
The awareness continuum, what does that refer to?
It's a way of understanding those different levels of awareness that we experience, ranging from the most basic sensory level to more complex levels of thought, emotion, and meaning making.
So at that most basic level, we're aware of our physical sensations, the feeling of the chair beneath us or the sound of our breath.
Exactly. And as we move along the continuum, we become aware of our emotions, our thoughts, the stories we tell ourselves. We become aware of our interactions with others, the roles we play.
Like a ladder of awareness, with
Mm.
each rung representing a different level of complexity.
I like that analogy. And Gestalt therapy is all about helping people expand their awareness to move more fluidly between those different levels.
So a Gestalt therapist might encourage a patient to notice their bodily sensations, to name their emotions, or to explore their thoughts.
Precisely. Bringing all those different levels of awareness into conscious awareness, integrating them into a more holistic understanding of oneself.
And by expanding our awareness in this way, we can gain a deeper understanding of our motivations, our patterns of behavior, the choices we make.
Exactly. And this expanded awareness is a key ingredient in achieving that okayness that Gestalt therapy seeks to cultivate.
It's like we're shedding light on those hidden corners of our being, embracing the fullness of who we are.
Beautifully said. Now, the book also discusses specific techniques for cultivating awareness, like the continuum of awareness exercise.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this continuum of awareness exercise.
It's a simple but powerful practice where the individual just sits comfortably, observes their internal experience without judgment. They might notice their breath, bodily sensations, thoughts, or emotions. The key is to simply observe without trying to change anything.
It's also like a form of mindfulness meditation.
It is very similar. And like mindfulness meditation, this practice can help us develop greater self-awareness, emotional regulation, and a sense of groundedness in the present moment.
It's like hitting the pause button on our busy minds, simply allowing ourselves to be present with what is.
Exactly. And this practice of present moment awareness is the foundation for all other Gestalt therapy techniques.
It makes sense that we need to be aware of our experience before we can work with it and transform it.
Absolutely. And the continuum of awareness exercise is a wonderful tool for cultivating that foundational awareness.
Okay, as we continue exploring this rich tapestry of Gestalt therapy, I'm curious to hear more about how it addresses the concept of polarities.
That's a great question. Gestalt therapy recognizes that we all experience internal polarities, those opposing forces within us that can create conflict, tension. These polarities could be anything from love and hate to strength and vulnerability, or control and surrender.
Like the classic yin and yang symbol, where seemingly opposite forces are interconnected, interdependent.
Precisely. And Gestalt therapy doesn't seek to eliminate these polarities. It helps us become more aware of them and integrate them into a more harmonious whole.
So instead of suppressing or denying one side of the polarity, we learn to embrace both sides and find a balance between them.
Exactly. Recognizing that both sides are essential parts of who we are. By integrating them, we can access a greater sense of wholeness and authenticity.
Can you give us an example of how a Gestalt therapist might work with polarities?
Certainly. Imagine a patient who struggles with expressing anger. They might believe anger is bad and needs to be suppressed. A Gestalt therapist might help them explore the other side of that polarity, perhaps a fear of vulnerability or a desire to please others.
So by exploring that underlying fear or need, the patient might understand their resistance to expressing anger more deeply.
Exactly. And once they understand the function of their resistance, they can begin to experiment with new ways of expressing their anger, in a healthy and constructive way, of course.
It's like expanding our emotional vocabulary, learning to express the full range of our human experience.
That's a great way to put it. Now, the book also mentions the use of metaphors in Gestalt therapy.
Oh, metaphors. I love a good metaphor. How are they used in Gestalt therapy?
Metaphors are seen as powerful tools for unlocking unconscious processes, accessing deeper layers of meaning. They can help us bypass those rational defenses and connect with our experience in a more, well, visceral way.
So instead of asking a patient to directly analyze their feelings, a Gestalt therapist might use a metaphor to evoke those feelings in a more symbolic way.
Exactly. A therapist might ask a patient who's feeling stuck in life, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
That's a great question. It invites the patient to tap into their intuition, access a different level of knowing.
It does. And the patient's response might reveal a lot about their current state of being, the challenges they're facing. For example, a patient who's feeling depleted, unrooted, might say they're a withered tree, while someone feeling strong, resilient, might say they're a towering oak.
It's like the metaphor bypasses the intellectual mind and speaks directly to the soul.
I love that. That's the power of metaphors. They help us access a deeper level of wisdom and understanding that might not be available through our usual modes of thinking.
Okay, I'm definitely going to start incorporating more metaphors into my life. It sounds like a really fun and creative way to explore my inner world and to connect with others more deeply.
It is, and the book highlights a specific Gestalt technique that uses metaphors, the exaggeration technique.
The exaggeration technique. Tell me more.
It's a technique. It's a technique where the patient is asked to exaggerate a specific gesture, posture, or behavior to bring its underlying meaning to light, you
Oh,
know?
I see, I see. So for instance, if someone's constantly fidgeting with their hands, the therapist might ask them to really amp it up.
Exactly. Really go for it. Not about stopping the behavior, but about exploring it more fully.
And by exaggerating the movement, the patient might become aware of the underlying anxiety or tension driving it.
Precisely. Like they're turning up the volume on a subtle signal, making it easier to hear.
That's a great analogy.
Uh,
And by bringing those unconscious signals into conscious awareness, they can then address them, find healthier ways of coping.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit, the book also delves into the figure-ground relationship, a core concept in Gestalt therapy.
Okay, the figure-ground relationship. Remind me about that one.
Think of it like looking at a painting. You can only focus on certain elements at a time, right? The rest kind of becomes the background. Well, in Gestalt therapy, the figure is what's in the foreground of our awareness, while the ground is everything else that's present, but not in focus.
So the figure might be a strong emotion I'm feeling, and the ground would be all the other sensations, thoughts, experiences happening simultaneously, but not at the center of my attention.
Precisely. And the key is this figure-ground relationship is always shifting. What's in the foreground one moment might fade into the background the next as something else comes into focus.
Our attention is like a spotlight, constantly moving, illuminating different parts of our experience.
That's a great metaphor. Gestalt therapy helps us become more aware of this shifting spotlight, learning to direct it toward those aspects of our experience that are, well, most important for growth.
So not about controlling our experience, but developing a more flexible awareness that allows us to choose where we focus our attention.
Exactly. It's about becoming more skillful at navigating the complex landscape of our inner and outer worlds.
This reminds me of the awareness continuum. You know, those different levels of awareness we were talking about earlier?
It's all connected. The figure-ground relationship is constantly shifting within that awareness continuum.
Okay, so how do Gestalt therapists work with this figure ground dynamic in therapy?
There's a technique called the awareness exercise. The individual is guided to bring their awareness to different aspects of their experience, consciously shifting their attention from the figure to the ground and back again.
So it's like a guided meditation where the therapist might say, now notice the feeling of your feet on the floor. Now shift your attention to the sounds in the room. Now notice the thoughts passing through your mind.
Exactly. And by intentionally shifting their attention, individuals can develop greater flexibility, more range in their awareness.
It's like we're training our attention to become more like a wide-angle lens, able to take in a broader perspective.
That's a great way to put it. And this broadened awareness can help us see our patterns more clearly, identify unmet needs, make choices aligned with our values.
That makes a lot of sense. Expanding our awareness is crucial for making conscious choices, rather than just reacting habitually.
Absolutely. Speaking of conscious choices, let's go back to that big idea, the concept of responsibility in Gestalt therapy.
Right. We talked about how responsibility isn't blame or guilt, but recognizing our own agency, shaping our experience.
Exactly. And there's a specific exercise the book describes called I Take Responsibility. It's about consciously shifting our language to reflect this sense of agency.
Could you give an example of how this language shift works in practice?
Sure. Let's say someone is feeling overwhelmed with a project at work and they say, I can't handle this. In the I Take Responsibility exercise, they would reframe that. Maybe something like, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now and I'm choosing to take a break to regain my composure.
Ah, I see. Shifting from a language of helplessness to a language of empowerment, even when things are tough.
Exactly. And that subtle shift can have a big impact on how we experience things internally.
We're taking back control of the narrative. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, we become the author of our own story.
Great way to put it. And this sense of authorship, of agency, that's crucial for that okayness Gestalt therapy aims to cultivate.
It makes sense. When we feel empowered to make choices, we're more likely to feel confident, capable, especially in navigating those life challenges.
Precisely. And this sense of empowerment extends to how Gestalt therapy approaches difficult emotions. Instead of avoiding or suppressing them, Gestalt therapy encourages us to, well, embrace them fully.
That sounds challenging. Most of us are conditioned to avoid unpleasant feelings. How does Gestalt therapy help people actually embrace those difficult emotions?
It's a process. Learning to stay present with those feelings, acknowledging them without judgment, allowing them to move through us. One technique used is called the hot seat.
Hot seat, that sounds intense. What does that involve?
In a group setting, one person sits in a chair designated as the hot seat. They focus on a particular issue or emotion they want to explore. The therapist guides them in staying present, and the other group members offer support reflections.
So it's about creating a safe, supportive space for individuals to process their emotions in a very direct, present way.
Exactly. And what's interesting is the emphasis is not on analyzing or intellectualizing the emotion. It's on just experiencing it fully.
So less about figuring out why we feel a certain way
Yeah.
and more about allowing ourselves to feel it without resistance.
Precisely. And what often happens is by allowing ourselves to fully experience the emotion, it starts to lose its power over us. It might intensify initially, but then it naturally begins to dissipate.
Like the emotion has a wave-like quality. If we resist it, it crashes over us. But if we ride the wave, it eventually subsides.
That's a great analogy. And this willingness to ride the waves of our emotions, embrace the full spectrum of our human experience, that's a key aspect of the okayness that Gestalt therapy cultivates.
It's about recognizing that our emotions, even the difficult ones, are a natural part of who we are, and they have something to teach us.
Exactly. By learning to embrace our emotions, we become more whole, more integrated, ultimately more okay with ourselves, just as we are.
This reminds me of something you mentioned earlier about how Gestalt therapy sees every aspect of our experience as having value.
Absolutely. It's recognizing that even the parts of ourselves we might judge as negative or unacceptable have a role to play in our overall growth.
They're all pieces of a puzzle, and each piece, no matter how oddly shaped or seemingly insignificant, is essential for completing the picture.
I love that metaphor, this acceptance of all aspects of ourselves, even the parts we might judge or try to hide, that's a key element of okayness.
It's about embracing who we are, flaws and all, recognizing that our imperfections are what make us unique, beautiful.
Beautifully said. Now let's talk about another key aspect of Gestalt therapy that contributes to okayness, the therapeutic relationship.
Makes sense. The quality of that relationship between therapist and patient must have a huge impact.
Absolutely. Gestalt therapy emphasizes an authentic, present-centered relationship between the therapist and the patient.
So it's not about the therapist being this detached expert, but being present and engaged with the patient as a fellow human being.
Exactly. The therapist brings their full self to the encounter, sharing their own humanity and vulnerability as appropriate.
It sounds like the therapeutic relationship in Gestalt therapy is more collaborative, more egalitarian than in some other approaches.
That's a good observation. The therapist and patient are partners on a journey, working together to uncover the patient's inner wisdom and potential.
A beautiful vision of therapy, a shared journey, a process of co-creation, rather than just a one-way street of advice.
You've captured it perfectly. Now, one of the key qualities Gestalt therapists cultivate is creative indifference.
Creative indifference. That sounds almost like a contradiction. What does that mean?
It's about holding a balanced attitude of care and detachment. The therapist cares deeply about the patient's well-being, but they don't get attached to a particular outcome.
So, trusting the process, allowing the patient to find their own way, rather than trying to force them into a preconceived mold.
Exactly. Recognizing that each individual's journey is unique. The therapist's role is to facilitate that journey, not dictate it.
That makes sense. It seems like creative indifference would allow the therapist to be more present, more responsive to the patient's needs in the moment.
Absolutely. And it allows the patient to feel more empowered, more autonomous in their own process.
Like the therapist is creating a safe, supportive space for the patient to explore their inner world without feeling pressured.
Precisely. And that sense of safety and trust is essential for the patient to fully open up, engage in the process.
Creative indifference is really fascinating. It seems like a delicate balance.
It is a testament to the respect that Gestalt therapy has for the individual's capacity for healing.
Speaking of healing,
Hmm.
the book mentions that Gestalt therapy can be really effective in working with trauma. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Of course. Gestalt therapy approaches trauma by helping the individual reestablish a sense of safety and agency in their body and environment.
So it's not about digging into the details of the traumatic event itself, trying to analyze it intellectually.
Not necessarily. While processing the experience can be part of healing, Gestalt therapy recognizes that the body often holds on to trauma in ways the mind might not fully grasp.
So it's about addressing the trauma on a physical and emotional level, as well as a cognitive level.
Exactly. One of the key ways Gestalt therapy works with trauma is by helping the individual reconnect with their bodily sensations, to learn to regulate their nervous system.
That makes a lot of sense. Trauma often leaves people feeling disconnected from their bodies, overwhelmed by intense emotions.
Precisely. So, Gestalt therapy might use grounding exercises, mindfulness, or even movement therapy to help the individual feel more grounded, more present in their body.
Helping them reclaim that sense of safety and control within their own physical experience.
You got it. Another important aspect of Gestalt therapy's approach to trauma is the emphasis on choice.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, trauma can leave people feeling powerless, trapped, as if they have no control over their lives. Gestalt therapy empowers individuals by helping them recognize the choices they do have, even when things are challenging.
So helping them reclaim a sense of agency,
Yeah.
to recognize that they're not defined by their trauma.
Precisely. That process of reclaiming agency is essential for healing, for moving forward.
It seems like that focus on embodiment, present moment awareness,
Yeah.
choice would be so valuable for people who have experienced trauma.
Absolutely. It's a gentle but powerful approach that can help people navigate the complex, often overwhelming aftermath of trauma.
Okay, as we delve deeper into this idea of Gestalt therapy as a Western path to enlightenment, I'm curious about how these principles can help people access those deeper states of awareness and connection.
That's a great question. The book suggests one key pathway is through cultivating self-support.
Self-support. What does that mean in the context of Gestalt therapy?
It's about developing the capacity to meet our own needs, both physically and emotionally, without relying on external validation.
So becoming more independent, self-sufficient.
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing that we already have the resources within ourselves, learning to access those resources, trusting our own inner wisdom.
Shifting from a place of dependence on others to a place of inner strength and resilience.
Exactly. This shift towards self-support is a key step toward achieving that okayness.
It makes sense. When we feel confident in our ability to meet our own needs, we're less likely to seek validation from others or to feel threatened by external things.
Absolutely. This sense of inner security and self-reliance allows us to move through the world with more ease, more freedom.
So how does Gestalt therapy help people cultivate this self-support?
Well, there are several techniques. One approach is to help individuals become more aware of their internal dialogue, the way they talk to themselves.
Interesting idea. Our self-talk can have a huge impact on how we feel overall.
It can. Gestalt therapy encourages individuals to notice the quality of their self-talk, identify any negative or self-critical patterns, and then shift those patterns towards more supportive, more compassionate self-talk.
Becoming our own best friend. Offering ourselves the same kindness and encouragement we might offer to someone we love.
Exactly. Cultivating compassionate self-talk can have a profound impact on our sense of self-worth and on our ability to handle life's challenges.
It makes sense that when we treat ourselves with kindness and understanding, we feel more confident, more resilient when things get tough.
Absolutely. That inner strength and resilience is key to self-support.
Now, the book also mentions the importance of contact in Gestalt therapy. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Contact in Gestalt therapy refers to the way we connect with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us.
It's about our capacity for engagement, for relationship.
Exactly. Gestalt therapy recognizes that healthy contact is essential for our well-being. When we can make authentic contact with ourselves, others, and the world, we feel more alive, more vibrant, more connected.
But what happens when our ability to make contact is disrupted or blocked?
That's where a lot of our psychological and emotional difficulties come from. Gestalt therapy helps individuals identify and address those blocks to contact so they can restore their capacity for healthy relationships.
Can you give some examples of what these blocks of contact might look like?
Absolutely. Some common ones include withdrawing from others, putting up walls, projecting feelings onto others, or playing roles, things that prevent us from showing up authentically.
It sounds like these blocks can manifest in a lot of ways, both internally and externally.
You're right. And Gestalt therapy provides a framework for understanding those blocks, developing strategies to overcome them.
So how might a Gestalt therapist work with someone who's struggling with these blocks?
One approach is through experiments, those spontaneous and creative explorations we talked about earlier.
Right, the experiments that emerge organically.
Exactly. For example, if a patient struggles to express their needs in a relationship, the therapist might create an experiment. Maybe role-playing a scenario where the patient practices asserting their needs clearly and directly.
Providing a safe space for the patient to experiment with new ways of relating, to practice those skills in a real-world context.
Precisely. And by repeatedly doing these experiments, the patient starts to internalize those new ways of relating, develop a greater capacity for healthy contact.
It sounds like Gestalt therapy really emphasizes experiential learning, actually putting those principles into practice.
You got it. It's not just about talking about these concepts, it's about embodying them, making them a part of our lived experience.
Makes a lot of sense. It seems like Gestalt therapy offers a very practical, embodied approach to growth and transformation.
It certainly does. And this emphasis on embodiment is a key element of what the book describes as the Western path to enlightenment.
Okay, I'm curious to hear more. How does that focus on embodiment connect to the concept of enlightenment?
Well, the book suggests that enlightenment isn't some mystical state separate from our everyday experience. It's a state of being that is available to us here and now, through our bodies and our senses.
So it's about recognizing that the divine, the sacred, isn't something outside of ourselves, but something present within us.
Exactly. And Gestalt therapy's focus on embodiment helps us reconnect with that inner divinity, to experience the sacredness of our own bodies, the world around us.
That's a beautiful idea. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from the universe, but a part of it.
Precisely. By cultivating a deeper sense of embodiment, of presence in our bodies and in the world, we open ourselves to a greater sense of connection, of wholeness, of peace.
It sounds like Gestalt therapy offers a grounded and practical approach to spiritual growth, one that doesn't require us to renounce the world or seek something outside of ourselves.
You've captured it perfectly. It's about embracing the fullness of our human experience, with all its complexities and contradictions, recognizing that within that very humanness lies the potential for profound awakening and transformation.
That's a powerful message. Now, as we continue our exploration, I'm curious to hear more about the role of creativity in Gestalt therapy.
That's a great question. Creativity is seen as fundamental to human nature in Gestalt therapy. It's woven into the therapeutic process itself.
So it's not just about using creative techniques, it's about fostering a creative attitude in both the therapist and the patient.
Exactly. Gestalt therapy encourages both the therapist and patient to embrace spontaneity, to be open to new possibilities, to experiment with different ways of being and relating.
So Gestalt therapy sees creativity as a key ingredient in personal growth and transformation.
Absolutely. It's through creativity that we break free from rigid patterns. We explore new perspectives and discover hidden potential.
So how might a Gestalt therapist foster creativity in a therapeutic setting?
One way is through metaphors, imagery, and storytelling. As we discussed, metaphors can bypass our rational defenses, tap into deeper levels of meaning.
Right. Metaphors can speak direct to the soul.
Exactly. And they can be a powerful way to unlock creative potential, to facilitate those new insights.
It seems like Gestalt therapy encourages us to tap into our imaginations, use our creative energy for healing and growth.
It does. And this emphasis on creativity is another aspect of what the book calls the Western path to enlightenment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does creativity connect to the concept of enlightenment?
Well, the book suggests that enlightenment isn't about reaching some fixed state of perfection. It's about embracing a continual process of growth, of unfolding, of becoming. And creativity is what drives that process.
Being open to new possibilities,
Absolutely.
embracing change, expressing ourselves in unique and authentic ways.
Precisely. And through that creative expression, that willingness to explore and experiment, we awaken to the fullness of our being. We tap into that infinite potential that lies within.
That's a beautiful vision. It seems like Gestalt therapy offers a very dynamic and empowering approach to spiritual growth, one that encourages us to tap into our creative energy and embrace the journey.
It does. And it's through this creative journey that we can move beyond those limitations of our ego, connect with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning in our lives.
Now, the book also mentions a specific technique for fostering creativity, the empty chair dialogue. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. The empty chair dialogue is a powerful tool for working with internal conflict, for accessing different parts of ourselves. It's often used to bring those opposing forces within us into dialogue, to give voice to the parts of ourselves that we might normally suppress.
Creating a space for internal negotiation and integration. Can you give an example of how this might work?
Of course. Let's say someone is struggling with a decision. They feel torn between two options. The therapist might invite them to put two chairs facing each other, representing those two options. The individual would sit in one chair and embody one option, expressing all their thoughts and feelings associated with that choice. Then they would switch to the other chair, embodying the other option, giving voice to that perspective.
It's like having a conversation with yourself, allowing each part to have its say.
Exactly. What often happens is, through this dialogue, a new understanding emerges, a solution that honors both perspectives.
We're creating space for internal harmony and integration, allowing all parts of ourselves to come together, work towards a common goal.
That's a great way to put it. This integration of different parts of ourselves is essential for that wholeness, that okayness that Gestalt therapy cultivates.
It seems like Gestalt therapy's emphasis on dialogue, internally and externally, is a powerful way to foster understanding, compassion, and ultimately healing.
Absolutely. And this emphasis on dialogue is another aspect of what the book describes as the Western path to enlightenment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does dialogue connect to the concept of enlightenment?
Well, the book suggests that enlightenment isn't about isolating ourselves from the world or other people. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, our shared humanity, and our responsibility to one another.
So it's about moving beyond our individual ego, embracing a more compassionate and interconnected way of being.
Exactly. And dialogue is a powerful tool for fostering that connection and compassion. It's through dialogue that we bridge the gap between ourselves and others, learn to see the world through different eyes, and expand our capacity for understanding and empathy.
So Gestalt therapy sees dialogue as a key ingredient in both personal and collective transformation.
It does. And this emphasis on dialogue is another example of how Gestalt therapy offers a grounded and practical approach to spiritual growth.
Now, as we continue our exploration, I'm curious to hear more about boundaries. The book mentions that setting healthy boundaries is an important part of the Gestalt approach.
That's right. Gestalt therapy recognizes that healthy boundaries are essential for well-being and for maintaining those healthy relationships.
Okay, so let's define boundaries in this context. What are we talking about?
Boundaries are the limits we set, to protect our physical, emotional, and mental space. They define what's acceptable behavior from others, and they help us maintain a sense of autonomy and self-respect.
So knowing where we end and others begin, and communicating those boundaries effectively.
Exactly. And Gestalt therapy recognizes that many of our psychological and emotional difficulties come from having weak or unhealthy boundaries.
That makes sense. If we don't have clear boundaries, we might allow others to take advantage of us.
Precisely. And that can lead to feelings of resentment, anger, even depression.
So how does Gestalt therapy help people establish healthier boundaries?
One approach is the I statement. We touched on this with the I take responsibility exercise.
Right? Owning our experience rather than blaming others.
Exactly. The I statement is a powerful tool for communicating our boundaries, clearly and assertively. Instead of saying, "You always make me feel bad," we could say, "When you speak to me like that, I feel hurt and disrespected."
Focusing on our own experience. Expressing our needs and feelings directly, without blaming.
Precisely. And that shift in language can be incredibly empowering. It allows us to take ownership of our experience, to set clear limits without attacking or blaming.
It seems like this approach would be especially helpful in relationships with, power dynamics.
It can be. Gestalt therapy recognizes that power dynamics exist in all relationships, and it offers tools for navigating them in a healthy and respectful way.
So not about eliminating power differentials, but about communicating our needs and boundaries effectively
Yeah.
within those existing dynamics.
Exactly. And that emphasis on clear, assertive communication is essential for creating those healthy, fulfilling relationships.
That makes sense. Setting healthy boundaries isn't about shutting others out, becoming isolated. It's about creating a space for authentic connection based on mutual respect and understanding.
You've got it. And this capacity for healthy and authentic connection, that's at the heart of what the book calls the Western path to enlightenment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does setting boundaries connect to this concept of enlightenment?
Well, the book suggests enlightenment isn't about merging with the universe or becoming one with everything. It's about recognizing our individuality, our unique perspective, and our responsibility to ourselves and to the larger whole.
Finding a balance between individuality and connection.
Exactly. And healthy boundaries help us maintain that balance. They give us space to cultivate our own sense of self, explore our unique path, and contribute to the world authentically.
So Gestalt therapy sees boundaries as a necessary foundation for both personal growth and spiritual awakening.
It does. This emphasis on boundaries is another example of how Gestalt therapy offers a grounded approach to spiritual development.
Now, as we delve deeper into this idea of Gestalt therapy as a Western path to enlightenment, I'm curious about how these principles can help people access those deeper states of awareness and connection.
That's a great question. The book suggests one of the key pathways is through cultivating what's called presence.
Presence. That's a concept that's used a lot in mindfulness practices.
It is. And Gestalt therapy places a high value on presence, being fully engaged in the here and now without judgment or distraction.
Letting go of regrets about the past and worries about the future. Embracing the power of now.
Exactly. Recognizing that everything we need to heal, to grow, to create a fulfilling life is available to us right now.
Saying, this moment is all there is and it's enough.
Beautifully said. And Gestalt therapy offers a variety of techniques for getting our awareness into the here and now, focusing on our breath, noticing our bodily sensations, paying attention to the details of our surroundings.
Cultivating a sense of presence. Grounding ourselves in the reality of our immediate experience.
Exactly. And this practice of present moment awareness can have a profound impact. It can help us reduce stress, increase our enjoyment, and connect more deeply with ourselves and others.
Sounds like cultivating present moment awareness is an essential foundation for experiencing that sense of okayness that Gestalt therapy emphasizes.
Absolutely. By being fully present, we can let go of that need to control or fix ourselves and just allow ourselves to be.
This brings us back to that core Gestalt principle of acceptance, embracing what is rather than resisting it.
You're right. And this acceptance, this willingness to be present with our experience without judgment, that's key to okayness.
It's recognizing that everything in our experience, even the difficult parts, has a purpose.
Precisely. Embracing the totality of our experience opens us to a deeper level of understanding, compassion, ultimately to a sense of wholeness, peace.
That's a beautiful vision. Now, as we continue to explore these profound concepts, I'm curious to hear more about the role of spirituality in Gestalt therapy.
That's a great question. While Gestalt therapy doesn't adhere to any specific religious doctrine, it does have a spiritual dimension.
Okay, so how does Gestalt therapy approach spirituality?
It sees spirituality as inherent to human nature, a yearning for connection, meaning, and purpose, something that transcends our individual ego.
So not about adhering to a particular set of beliefs or practices, but about cultivating a sense of awe, wonder, and connection with something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. Gestalt therapy offers tools and practices for accessing those deeper dimensions of ourselves, for cultivating a more meaningful and soulful way of living.
Sounds like Gestalt therapy sees spirituality as a part of wholeness and well-being.
It does, and it recognizes that our spiritual journey is personal, individual. There's no one right way to be spiritual, and Gestalt therapy honors that diversity.
So how might a Gestalt therapist support someone's spiritual exploration in therapy?
One approach is guided imagery and visualization. These techniques can help individuals access deeper levels of awareness, connect with their intuition, and explore their unique spiritual beliefs and experiences.
So the therapist might guide them to visualize a peaceful scene or connect with a sense of loving energy within.
Exactly. And these visualizations can be incredibly powerful, helping people connect with peace, hope, and purpose.
It seems like Gestalt therapy encourages us to tap into our inner wisdom, to trust our intuition as guides.
Absolutely. And this emphasis on self-discovery and personal experience is another aspect of what the book calls the Western path to enlightenment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does this emphasis on personal experience connect to the concept of enlightenment?
The book suggests enlightenment can't be achieved through intellectual understanding or by following a set of rules. It's about having a direct experience of our true nature, of our connection to something larger than ourselves.
So, moving beyond concepts and beliefs into the realm of direct experience.
Precisely. Gestalt therapy provides a framework for facilitating those direct experiences through practices like mindfulness, embodiment, and creative expression.
It sounds like Gestalt therapy sees spirituality as a journey of awakening, of unfolding, discovering the divine within and around us.
Beautifully said. And it's through this journey that we can move beyond those limitations of our ego, connect with a deeper sense of purpose in our lives.
Now, as we continue to explore, I'm curious to hear more about how Gestalt therapy views growth.
That's a great question. Growth is central to Gestalt therapy. It's seen as an ongoing process of becoming more fully ourselves, expanding our awareness, living more authentically.
So not striving for some fixed endpoint, but about embracing the journey.
Exactly. Gestalt therapy recognizes that growth is dynamic, ever-evolving. It encourages us to embrace the challenges and opportunities that come with that.
Sounds like Gestalt therapy sees growth as an adventure, not like a destination.
That's a great way to put it. And like any adventure, there are twists and turns, ups and downs. Gestalt therapy gives us the tools to navigate those with more awareness, resilience, even creativity.
Equipping us with the tools to face those inevitable challenges with grace and courage.
Precisely. One of the key tools is the ability to distinguish between our shoulds and our wants.
Interesting distinction. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. Our shoulds often come from external expectations, societal norms, messages we've internalized from family, culture. Our wants come from somewhere deeper, from our authentic selves.
So our shoulds might be pushing us toward a certain career, a certain way to behave, but our wants might be about a different passion altogether.
Exactly. Gestalt therapy helps us become more aware of these different voices,
Yeah.
to make choices that are aligned with our true wants, not those shoulds.
It's about figuring out what truly brings us joy and fulfillment, not just what we think we should be doing.
You got it. And aligning our actions with our authentic desires, that's a key part of growth in Gestalt therapy.
That distinction between shoulds and wants sounds incredibly liberating. It's like giving ourselves permission to really pursue our own path, even if it's different from what society expects.
Absolutely. It's about honoring our individuality, trusting our own inner compass.
So how might a Gestalt therapist help someone figure out the difference between their shoulds and their wants?
Well, one approach is through experiments. The therapist might invite the person to experiment with different choices, behaviors, to see how those feel, to notice which choices bring a sense of aliveness and which leave them feeling drained.
A process of trial and error, listening to our bodies and hearts to guide us towards what feels right.
Exactly. And through this experimentation, we develop self-trust. Start making choices that are really aligned with those desires.
It seems like Gestalt therapy really empowers us to create our own lives, to make them truly meaningful and fulfilling.
It does, and this self-creation process is, again, part of what the book calls that Western path to enlightenment.
Okay, I'm hooked. How does this idea of creating our own lives connect to enlightenment?
Well, the book suggests enlightenment isn't about passively receiving wisdom from somewhere else. It's about engaging with life, making choices, using our creative energy to shape our own destiny.
So it's a shift from being passive to being an active participant in creating our reality.
Exactly. And this shift in perspective is a key element of the okayness that Gestalt therapy aims to cultivate.
Makes sense. When we feel empowered to shape our lives, we're more likely to feel confident, purposeful, and ultimately okay with where we are.
Absolutely. And that sense of empowerment is essential for living a fulfilling life.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into Gestalt therapy, I'm struck by the recurring theme of wholeness. It seems central to the entire approach.
You're absolutely right. Gestalt therapy emphasizes that we are inherently whole, even with our imperfections.
And this wholeness isn't about being perfect or denying challenges, is it?
Not at all. It's about embracing all of our experience, the good, the bad, everything. Recognizing that those imperfections are what make us unique.
It's a powerful message of self-acceptance. And it seems like this wholeness isn't something we force. It emerges organically through the Gestalt process.
You got it. It's about letting go of the need to control or fix ourselves, trusting that we already have the wisdom and resources we need within. It's about allowing ourselves to simply be.
This reminds me of something we discussed earlier. The Gestalt therapy is less about techniques and more about a way of being.
Exactly. Cultivating a certain attitude or perspective towards ourselves and the world, approaching life with curiosity, openness, and a willingness to embrace what we don't know.
Gestalt therapy sounds like a very liberating and empowering approach to life.
It is. It's about recognizing that we already have everything we need to live a fulfilling life. It's about tapping into our inner resources and trusting our own wisdom.
So as we wrap up this incredible deep dive, what final thought would you like to leave our listeners with?
Well, the book poses a really interesting question. If okayness is our natural state, as Gestalt therapy suggests, what might be blocking us from experiencing that more fully? What beliefs, patterns, behaviors might be getting in the way? And what can we do even today to start removing those obstacles, to embrace who we truly are?
That's a powerful invitation. It encourages us to look inward, to explore, and to start making conscious choices that align with our true selves.
Exactly. And as we make those choices, we open ourselves to the possibility of experiencing more peace, more joy, more fulfillment in our lives.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this fascinating exploration of Gestalt therapy and its connection to enlightenment. I think I speak for both of us when I say this has been a really enriching experience.
The pleasure was all mine. It's always a joy to dive deep into these transformative ideas.
To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive as well. We'll be back soon with more explorations. Until then, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep embracing who you are.